ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाखया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिन् इति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So in the previous verse, Lord Kapila had explained that the devotees worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is all-pervading and who is the Lord of this material universe. And how do they worship Him? They worship Him with unflinching devotional service, giving up all kinds of aspiration to be happy in this material world, to be promoted to some heavenly planets, or to have something of this material attachments, relationships, body. And thus, I, being very merciful unto Him, I become His deliverer from this material world. I take Him across the ocean of birth and death. That is what Lord Kapila had said. So, in today's verse, the exclusive surrender unto the Supreme Lord is highlighted. Because in the last verse the Lord had said that I take my devotees out of this material entanglement because they worship me with unflinching devotion. But then one may wonder, okay, the Lord is taking the devotees across the cycle of birth and death. But then there are many other processes. There is jnana, there is yoga. So probably by pursuing other ways also, one should be able to transcend this material world. By jnana, probably I become Brahman, and when I am Brahman, then I am out of this material world. Or by mystic yoga process, one may think that this penances and austerities which I have been following, that will be sufficient for me to take me out of this material entanglement. But in today's verse, the Lord is saying nothing else works. Apart from surrendering unto me, one cannot get out of this Tivram Bhayam. This material world is designated, just like in Bhagavad Gita, Umapati Prabhu, what is Lord calling this material world in Bhagavad Gita? Anantarupa, Dukhalayam, Ashashvatam. This material world is a place of misery. So here Lord Kapila is saying, this is Tivram Bhayam. This material world is terrible, dangerous. So, very interesting. Na anyatra mad bhagavataha. There is no one else, na anyatra. No other process. Apart from myself, mad bhagavataha. Apart from me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no other process. Why? How it is that the Supreme Lord actually can take us out of this Tivram Bhayam? Because He is Pradhana Purusha Ishvara. He is the Lord of Pradhana. This Prakriti, this material nature, it is called Pradhana and Prakriti. And at the same time, He is also the Lord of all living entities, Purusha. So Guru Kripa, what is said here? Pradhana, Purusha, Ishvara. What does it mean? Pradhana, Purusha, Ishvarat. Satya Govind? Yes. The Supreme Lord is the master of Prakriti and He is also the master of all living entities. So then is it difficult for Him to take us out of this Prakriti? If He is the master, He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mad Bhagavataha, He is the Supreme Lord, and at the same time He is Pradhana Purusha Ishvarat. He is the master of Prakriti, this material creation, this material world, material energy, and He is also the master of the living entities. And at the same time, Atmanah Sarva Bhutanam, He is the super soul of all living entities. And that is why He is promising that I am competent. No one else is competent to take you out of this Tivram Bhayam. Bhayam Tivram Nivartate. And thus, those who surrender unto me, those who worship me, I can take them out of this Tivram Bhayam. This material existence, it is called Tivram Bhayam. Nivartate. I can take them out. So Prabhupada is very nicely translating. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself. So the Lord is saying, do not take to anyone else. Do not take anyone else shelter. Don't take the shelter of your material power, your opulence, your near and dear ones, relatives, friends, that they will be able to save me, or the so-called leaders of this material world, or even devatas, demigods. Even the most powerful demigods like Brahma or Shiva, they cannot take you out of this material world. What does Prabhupada quote in the purport? One verse. Without Supreme Lord, no one else can take you out of birth and death cycle. Who knows that verse? Harim vinana mritim taranti. Should all remember this verse. One small line of that verse. Correct? So that is said. Harim vinana mritim taranti. Without the mercy of the Supreme Lord, one cannot come out of this material existence. Mritim, this cycle of birth and death. So, this material world is compared to a terrible, fearful situation. Tivram means very sharp, very strong, very fierce. But the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord, it is so great that even though this material world is actually Tivram Bhayam, we don't realize it. Isn't it? Prabhupada says, when one is at the verge of death, he is in so many problems. So much of trouble, so much of suffering one faces when one is on the verge of death. Sometimes, if a person is very sinful, it is seen that days together for a week, a month, and sometimes even for a year, the person is lying in coma. He is dreaming. Sometimes tears are coming out from his eyes. It's a fact. But problem is, he is not able to express that terrible fear which he is undergoing. You see. So, this is the kind of terrible fear this material existence is called. And then, not that, okay, he was at the point of death, and then we all say, Acha, somehow or other, at least he got rid of this body. All his sufferings are over, right? When a person is too much suffering, we also feel better he should die. Even sometimes we find when somebody is terminally ill in the family, his family people are waiting when he dies. It's a fact. Somebody is having cancer, suffering like anything, terrible suffering. Chemotherapy is going, taking so many medicines and so much of pain. Isn't it? Imagine. And all his family people are just waiting when this person will die, when his sufferings will end. So we are so foolish. We are thinking after he is gone, his sufferings are gone. No. It is a beginning of another chapter in his life. He carries his suffering. His sufferings are not gone. You see. Maybe one type of suffering is gone. But his new chapter will begin very soon, and another kind of suffering will begin. So, after death, tatha dehantar praptir, one has to take another body. He has to enter into another womb. And you can imagine, the soul is packed up in a bag of mother's womb for 9 to 10 months, unable to even freely move. covered by, surrounded by blood, surrounded by urine, stool, different kinds of insects, worms, terrible suffering. So where is suffering gone? Suffering is still there. And so much suffering, if somehow or other, if the living entity is little pious, then he prays to the Lord, my dear Lord, please release me from this suffering, terrible suffering. As soon as I come out, I will become your devotee. You see, if he is little pious, he prays like this. But unfortunately, Avarnatmika Shakti, it is so great. Moment he comes out and he's crying terribly because of the suffering of this material world. But then he's surrounded by loving relatives, parents, and again he is put into illusion. Isn't it? So, after death, he enters into the womb and he takes birth. He is there in the womb, terrible suffering. And not that after he is born, he is free from suffering now. One terrible suffering is gone, and now it's a lifetime of terrible suffering will become again. Even in the childhood we can see. Sometimes the child is crying, and the mother is thinking he is hungry. She is giving him water, she is giving him some milk, but the child does not stop. So he is undergoing some other kind of suffering. Something is biting him, cannot express anything. So much of terrible suffering. In that ignorance he is undergoing. And then, later on, birth ho gaya, then death, old age, disease. And that is not the end to it. Another threefold miseries. I may be very peacefully sitting, then mosquitoes are biting. Isn't it? I may be very peaceful, but then I get a letter from my enemy and my mind is very disturbed. So Adi Bhautik, Adi Devik, Adi Atmik, all these kleshas are there. You see? And Prabhupada explains that actually, because there is so much terrible suffering in this material world, the atheist class of people, those who do not believe that there is the Supreme Lord, they want to forget this terrible suffering. So they think that death finished. What is there even if I suffer? After death, everything is finished. There is no more birth. So why I have to worry? Isn't it? One may think like this. So, this atheist class of people, they want to deny rebirth because they want to deny this, they want to forget this terrible suffering. So, Prabhupada says, just by denying, this terrible fear is not gone. Do not think that just by denying, if somebody says there is no more birth, this terrible suffering is gone. It is just like a rabbit is closing its eyes when it sees an enemy. Doesn't mean that enemy is no more there. So simply being in illusion does not mean there is no suffering. Suffering is there. That we have to understand. But Maya's force is so much that in spite of seeing every day so much of suffering, person does not realize at all. He does not realize that after even giving up this body, karmana deva netrena, according to the activities I have done, I will be placed in some kind of more miserable situation. I may become a dog. Sometimes we see so many dogs, whole night they will be simply barking. That is the kind of life, isn't it? Roaming around here and there just in the search of the food. Or sometime one may get a life of living like a tree for hundreds of years, standing in one place, miserable situation. One may be little pious and he may become some devata, but still he is not free. Atyantika dukkha nivrati. Everybody is trying somehow or other to get rid of miseries of life, isn't it? So terrible suffering is there. No one can escape this. So, when the Lord asked Maharaj Yudhishthir, what is the most surprising thing you find in this material world? So Maharaj Yudhishthir replied, Ahani ahani bhutani Gachanti iha yamalayam. Practically every moment someone or other is being carried away in the mouth of death. Shesha sthavaram icchanti kim ascharyam atah param. But the ones who have not yet died, they are still thinking, I will leave, I want to leave. What is more surprising, what is more wonderful than this? Isn't it? Because the Avarnatmika Shakti is like that. It covers. Even though terrible suffering is there, he is still thinking, I am enjoying, I am happy. In whatever life I am happy. Even if one is in the life of a hog, he is still thinking, I am happy. So Prabhupada gives an example that once Indra was cursed by Brahaspati to become a hog. So he was living his life, miserable life in this material world. And when Brahma saw that time has passed, and he came down to earth and asked him that, my dear Indra, please come back to your heavenly kingdom. And he refused. He said, don't you see, I have so much of responsibility. I have my wife here, I have my children here. This is my heaven. Where is heaven? Isn't it? So this is called illusion. Moha. How much we become infatuated with material desires that actually we are leading a terrible life. That is what it is said here. Bhayam, tivram, terrible suffering, but one cannot realize. If one is intelligent, then he can realize, then he starts questioning. If one is mudha, then he is thinking, I am in whatever condition of life, I am happy. Sukha dukha, part of life. He thinks like this. When one is mudha. When one is intelligent, then he starts thinking. So there is a very nice verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita where when Sanatan Goswami came in touch with Lord Chaitanya So he surrendered to him, and he said some very interesting words. He said, Apnara hit ahit kichu na jani. Actually, I do not understand what is good for me and what is not good for me. Apanara hit ahit kichu na jani. Gramya vyavare pandita tai satyamani. But in local understanding, people are calling me as Pandita, learned man. But this is the kind of learned man I am. And I have also taken it that I am a learned man, but I do not know what is good for me, what is not good for me. And then he says, Ke ami, kene amaya jare tapatraya. I do not know who am I, ke ami. Kene amaya, why there are so much of suffering, jare, tapatraya, this tapatraya, threefold miseries, why they give so much trouble to the living entity? I have no idea, I do not know. So, when someone is little intelligent, then one can realize Tivram Bhayam by the mercy of the Lord. Otherwise, moodhas cannot realize. They are happy if they have some money, they are happy if they have children, they are happy if they have some relatives, and they are thinking enough. And even at the time of death, I will forget everything. So what is there? Whatever suffering I would have undergone, what is such a big deal about this? So they are not realizing. It's not small fear. It's a Tivram Bhayam, it is called. That realization does not come so easily. Isn't it? Only when one is little intelligent, then one can realize that actually this is Tivram Bhayam. And here Lord Kapila is saying, Tivram Bhayam Nivartate. One can get out of this Tivram Bhayam, and there is no other means. Do not surrender or depend on anyone else other than me. In Bhagavatam, actually, even though non-devotees sometimes may not be able to appreciate, but Krishna is very merciful to his devotees. Someone, somehow or other, if he has developed some attachment for the Lord actually takes care of his real welfare. So when Maharaj Yudhishthir asked this question to Krishna after performing Ashwamedha Yagna, my dear Lord, please clear one doubt. How is it that you are Lakshmipati? You are living in so much of opulence in Vaikunthas. You are Shad Aishwarya Purnam. And even when you have come down in Dwarka, so much of opulence. But how is it that your devotees are deprived of material wealth? They do not seem to be very opulent materially. Whereas Lord Shiva, he does not even has a house. He lives under a tree. And he lives in terrible cold like Kailash. Isn't it? But it is seen, even his demoniac followers, they have so much of material opulence. How do we understand this? So then Krishna replied, yes, this is my anugraha on my devotee. Yasyaham anugranami, on whomever I have special favor. if my special mercy is there on my devotee, first thing what I do, first installment I give him, Harishye tad dhanam shanaihi. I slowly take away all his material opulence. Second, Krishna says, and when his material opulence is taken away like this, then practically everybody rejects him. Yeah, what is he? Kuch nahi hai iske paas mein, bekar aadmi, isn't it? Useless fellow. And then the whole everybody rejects him. And when he is in such kind of external situation, he has no other mean but to completely depend on me. He becomes completely dependent on me. And that is my anugraha. You see. So, actually we can see that it is only this, when Shukdev Goswami was asked similar question by Maharaj Parikshit, Shukdev Goswami replied, he said, my dear Parikshit, Lord Shiva, he is Durgapati. He is the master of this material energy, three modes of material world. Durga is represented with this material energy of the Lord, Maya Shakti. So what is this Maya Shakti? Very nicely Shukdev Goswami explains. What is this Maya Shakti? What is this material opulence? He says, it is just the mixture of these three modes of material nature. Whatever different comforts of this life is there, the pleasure of the tongue, the pleasure of the genital, it's all created by these three modes of material nature, mixing in varieties, that's all. And this is what Lord Shiva can give to his followers. Can Lord Shiva give abhayam? Can he give him fearlessness from this material world? That is real wealth. That he cannot award. Isn't it? Whereas, so we can see, one who has got these material opulences, what is the result of that? Entanglement, more and more in this material world. So is it real wealth? Whereas, let us say somebody's so-called material wealth is gone and he has become dependent on the Supreme Lord, surrendered to the Supreme Lord. What does the Supreme Lord say? What is he saying? Divram bhayam nivartate. He will get out of fearful, isn't it, condition of this material existence. That is the real wealth Krishna gives to his devotees. And actually, the Supreme Lord, only when he sees that his devotee is getting carried away by material wealth, he does this as a special favor. But otherwise, when somebody is very responsible, just like we see the example of the Pancha Pandavas, they are very responsible. They had all kind of opulences, isn't it? We can see the Lord giving even material opulences even to Sudama. But the difference, there is a lot of difference. The material opulences we gain in this material world is by our karma, karma phala. The suffering we undergo is also our karma phala. But the suffering given to us temporarily by the Lord is not karma phala, it is His anugraha. We should realize this. The temporary suffering given by the Lord to His devotee is His mercy, not my karma phala. Similarly, the material opulence is also given to a devotee, that is also permanent. That is not out of karma phala. That is also anugraha of the Lord. And the devotee, neither in material opulence, nor in so-called temporary unhappiness, distress, he does not waver. He understands both are anugraha of the Supreme Lord. And that is how we find Maharani Kunti is saying, my dear Lord, if because of so much of terrible suffering we have undergone, you were always with us, then better let this terrible suffering always remain, because always we can have your darshan. Suffering is gone, you are also going away, better let the suffering remain. A devotee is not bothered about material suffering, material pleasure. He is only bothered about surrendering to the Supreme Lord. That is important. So this is what is said in this verse. We'll stop with this. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.